Welcome to another deep dive. Most people do not stay financially stuck because they are lazy.
Right. Or because they're uniquely unlucky.
Exactly. Or because they're making these massive, reckless mistakes.
Right.
Right. The truth that really jumped out at me from our sources today is, well, it's so much more counterintuitive than that.
It really is. It's almost hidden in plain sight.
Yeah. Because people stay financially trapped because they fall into patterns that actually feel completely normal. In fact, these patterns often feel, highly responsible.
They look like ambition.
Yes, ambition or like self-care. They look like you are doing exactly what society expects of a successful adult.
It's a pretty profound realization when you see it for the first time, because we're conditioned to believe that wealth destruction is loud.
Right, like a big explosion.
Yeah, we picture someone taking their life savings to a casino or, I don't know, investing in a blatant pyramid scheme.
Right.
But real financial stagnation is almost entirely silent. It's the result of invisible forces, subtle daily habits, and environmental pressures that just work against you, often while you are actively trying your hardest to get ahead.
And that is exactly what we are unpacking today for you. Our mission is to basically tear the cover off these behaviors. We're doing a deep dive into wealth traps that quietly keep you poor.
It's a great topic.
It really is. And we're drawing from a really fascinating stack of material today. We're synthesizing insights from a pair of highly regarded financial strategy pieces. One is called Escaping the Invisible Traps of Financial Stagnation, and the other is The Hidden Architecture of Financial Resilience.
Both excellent foundational texts.
Yeah, and we were combining those with a very sharp, unapologetic breakdown from the LX Network.
The synthesis of these particular sources is incredibly revealing, I think, because the strategic articles provide us with the structural mechanics.
Like the blueprint.
Exactly, the actual behavioral economics and psychology of why we make certain choices. Meanwhile, the Alex breakdown acts as a mirror.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, it shows us the raw, modern, everyday examples of how these traps disguise themselves in our current culture. Together, they explain a crucial reality, and that is, wealth is fundamentally not just a math equation.
Man, I am so glad you brought that up right away. Because that is the perfect entry point. The prevailing wisdom out there is that your financial health is just a spreadsheet.
Right. Just numbers.
Just income minus expenses, right? But it is so much deeper than that.
Exactly. Wealth is about the architecture of the life that your money is asked to support. You can have an exceptionally high income, an income that puts you in the top tier of earners globally.
Right.
But if the underlying structure of your life is built on these invisible traps, that money will simply vanish right into the floorboards.
Oh, wow. Just gone.
Just gone. You'll experience the exhaustion of running at full speed while the scenery around you never actually changes.
You just end up building a more expensive treadmill. So to actually dismantle this problem, we need to understand the structural mechanics at play here. Let's lay the groundwork.
Sounds good.
When we use the phrase wealth trap, we aren't talking about predatory lending or like macroeconomic recessions, although obviously those exist.
Sure. Yeah.
But based on the underlying psychology in our sources, how should we conceptualize a wealth trap in our everyday lives?
Well, the most accurate way to conceptualize it is as a micro habit, or a deeply ingrained belief that creates ongoing structural friction in your financial life.
Structural friction.
Okay, yeah. The defining characteristic of a wealth trap is its ordinariness. It blends perfectly into your daily routine.
Like it's just background noise.
Exactly. It is the $40 convenience purchase. It is the slight upgrade to a premium service. It's the choice to live in a specific zip code just because of how it sounds when you tell people where you live.
Oh, guilty. We've all been there.
Right. And individually, none of these choices are fatal. They do not trigger alarm bells.
Because it's just $40.
Exactly. But cumulatively, they create a permanent drag coefficient on your ability to build a surplus.
And this feeds directly into what I think is the most dangerous misconception our sources highlight. We are trained, almost from childhood, to assume that financial struggle is exclusively a symptom of low income.
Oh, absolutely.
The cultural narrative is always, if you are stressed about money, it is because you simply do not earn enough. The cure for financial anxiety is a higher salary.
Which is a remarkably persistent illusion. And if we look at the data and behavioral models presented in our materials, we see why that assumption is fundamentally flawed.
How so?
Well, income is merely the input. It dictates the volume of water flowing into the bucket. But wealth traps dictate the size and number of holes in the bottom of that bucket.
So increasing the water flow doesn't matter if the pressure just blows out the bottom anyway.
Precisely. You see this phenomenon constantly in high-stress, high-earning professions. The sources point out that it is entirely common to observe professionals double or even triple their income over a 5 to 10-year period.
Right.
Yet their self-reported financial anxiety does not decrease at all. They still feel completely trapped. They are still living paycheck to paycheck. They're just doing it in a higher tax bracket with way more expensive liabilities.
They graduate from stressing about a Honda payment to stressing about a Porsche payment.
Yes. Exactly that. And on the flip side, you have individuals who earn significantly less. People who may never break through a certain mid-level salary ceiling in their entire careers.
Right, just average earners.
But who manage to build extraordinary lasting stability. They build peace of mind and eventually significant net worth. The variable between those two outcomes is rarely luck.
What is it then?
It's the presence or absence of these invisible wealth traps.
Man, the deceptive nature of these traps is what makes this so difficult to navigate. When I was reading through the psychological breakdowns in the text, I actually found myself wincing in recognition.
It's a tough mirror to look into.
It really is. Because these traps do not wear villain costumes. They dress up as virtues.
That is the insidious part. They disguise themselves as behaviors that society actively applauds.
Exactly. You buy something you don't actually need, and the marketing algorithms have trained you to call it treating yourself or self-care.
Right.
Or you take on massive high-interest debt for a vehicle or a wardrobe, and you justify it as dressing for the job you want.
Right.
Or investing in your personal brand.
You're using the language of growth to justify behaviors that mathematically guarantee stagnation.
Yes. But okay, if I am looking at this from the perspective of someone just trying to live a good life, I have to challenge this premise slightly.
Go ahead.
If these traps look so completely normal, and literally everyone in your social circle, your neighborhood, and your office is engaging in them, how is a person supposed to even realize they are caught in one? It is like asking a fish to notice water.
That is the core challenge, and it's the exact reason this analysis exists. Awareness is the only functional antidote. The authors of our sources make a highly compelling argument. A trap relies on its invisibility to function. Once you understand the mechanics of a trap, it ceases to be a trap and becomes a choice.
Making the invisible visible.
Exactly. When you are blind to the trap, you react on autopilot. You follow the social script. But once you understand the underlying mechanism, once you see how your own neurochemistry and societal expectations are being leveraged against your bank account, the spell is broken.
Wow.
You can't avoid a snare you can't see, but once you know exactly where it is placed and how it is triggered, you can simply step around it.
Okay, so let's map out where these snares are actually hidden. Moving from abstract definitions to concrete reality, we need to examine how our own internal psychology actively works against our long-term interests.
Let's do it.
The sources categorize these brilliantly. Let's dig into the first notable case, the income trap, which is more commonly referred to in behavioral economics as lifestyle inflation.
This is arguably the most pervasive trap in the modern developed world. It is the default setting for almost everyone entering the workforce.
The core mechanism here is just fascinating. It's the psychological habit of treating every single extra dollar you earn as immediate permission to increase your baseline spending.
Yes. It's the feeling that a raise is a mandate to upgrade.
Exactly. You get a promotion, and instantly the regular grocery store is no longer good enough. You switch to the premium organic market.
Right.
You get a year-end bonus, and you immediately lease a slightly nicer apartment with better amenities. You add 3 more specialized streaming subscriptions. You stop cooking on Fridays and make it a habit to order expensive delivery.
And the danger is that it feels entirely harmless in the moment, because each of those individual lifestyle upgrades is relatively small.
Yeah, it's just $50.
Right. You are rationalizing $50 more a month here, $100 more a month there. It doesn't feel like you are buying a yacht. It feels like a minor, deserved quality of life adjustment.
You know, when I was processing this, the perfect image came to mind. It's like turning up the speed on a treadmill every time your leg muscles get a little bit stronger.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Right. You get a raise, your financial muscles grow, so you bump the treadmill speed from a level 4 to a level 6. Then a few years later, you get another bonus, you feel stronger, and you bump it to an 8.
And you're working so hard.
Exactly.
Mm.
If you look at your effort, you are running so much faster, you were sweating harder, you were expending maximum professional energy. But if you looked down at your feet, you were standing in the exact same place you were 5 years ago.
You haven't moved.
Not a single inch.
Yeah.
Your distance from financial freedom hasn't changed at all.
That perfectly captures the physics of the trap. You are increasing your velocity, but your forward distance remains strictly at 0.
Yeah.
And what is happening mechanically here, and the strategic sources emphasize this deeply, is a failure to understand and protect what they call the gap.
The gap is such a vital concept. Walk us through how that works, mathematically and psychologically.
Wealth does not exist in your income. Wealth exists exclusively in the gap between what you earn and what you spend.
Okay.
That space in the middle is your margin. It is the only place where capital accumulates. It is where your savings actually grow, where your investments compound, and where your future options are funded.
Makes sense.
Let's use simple numbers. If you earn $50,000 a year and you spend $45,000 to maintain your life, you have a $5,000 gap. You have margin.
You have a cushion.
Exactly. Now, suppose you work incredibly hard, you upskill, and you double your income to $100,000 a year.
A huge win.
But because you are caught in the lifestyle inflation trap, you immediately upgrade your housing, your car, your vacations, and your daily habits. Your spending rises to $95,000.
Oh, man. So your gap is still exactly $5,000?
Precisely. You've doubled your income, which took massive effort, but you have not increased your wealth-building capacity at all. Your gap has not changed.
That is depressing.
In fact, your situation is actually much more dangerous now.
Wait, why is it more dangerous? Because the higher the lifestyle, the harder the fall?
Yes. You now have a vastly more expensive, complex lifestyle to maintain. The overhead required just to survive your own baseline has doubled.
Right.
If you lose your job when you're spending $45,000 a year, it is stressful, but it is manageable. If you lose your job when you require $95,000 a year just to keep the lights on and the cars in the driveway, it is an absolute catastrophe.
Wow.
Income growth does not automatically create freedom. If the gap never widens, more money just creates a heavier, more fragile version of dependence. You become an indentured servant to your own upgraded tastes.
That is a chilling way to phrase it, but it's undeniable.
Sure.
And it transitions perfectly into the second psychological snare, the price tag trap.
Ah, yes.
This is the phenomena of confusing cheap with valuable.
Ah.
I see this constantly. There is a whole subculture of people who assume that the ultimate financial flex, the true mark of financial discipline, is simply buying the absolute cheapest version of whatever they require.
It is a fundamental misunderstanding of how capital depreciates over time. Cheap simply means the upfront point of sale price is low.
Right.
Valuable means the item delivers a high return on the capital deployed over its entire functional lifespan. Those are two entirely different metrics, and confusing them is a massive wealth trap.
The Alex breakdown provided some incredibly relatable examples of this. They talked about the false economy of buying cheap shoes.
A classic example.
Right. You buy the $20 pair of work shoes because you want to save money. But because the materials are terrible, they literally fall apart in 3 months. So you buy another $20 pair and another...
You're just bleeding money.
Exactly. Over 2 years, you have spent $160 on shoes and your feet have hurt the entire time. Whereas if you had bought the high-quality $120 pair initially, they would still be in great shape and you would be $40 richer.
It's so true. They also highlight the mattress scenario, which is even more impactful because it affects your physiology.
Oh yeah, sleep is huge.
You buy the absolute cheapest mattress available to save $400, but a poor mattress degrades your sleep quality. Suddenly you have chronic lower back pain. You are sleeping poorly, which means your cognitive function and productivity at work drop.
It spirals.
It does. You're more stressed, and you end up paying for physical therapy or chiropractic visits that dwarf the $400 you supposedly saved.
And if we extrapolate this logic beyond household items, the hidden costs become staggering. Let's look at a major life choice, like housing.
Let's do it.
The text used the classic example of choosing a cheap apartment that is located 2 hours away from your workplace or the city center. On paper, the monthly rent is significantly lower. You feel like you are making a highly disciplined financial choice. But what is the total long-term cost of that decision?
The hidden costs are monumental. First, you have the literal financial costs, the gas, the tolls, the rapid depreciation and maintenance of your vehicle.
Yeah.
But the far more devastating cost is paid in time and energy. You are spending 4 hours a day in a car or on a commuter train. That is 20 hours a week, roughly 80 hours a month of your life. Gone.
And what happens to your state of mind? You arrive home at 7:30 p.m., completely physically and mentally exhausted.
Exactly. Because you are exhausted, you no longer have the energy to grocery shop or cook, so you start ordering expensive takeout. You are hemorrhaging money on convenience because your commute has drained your energy reserves.
That makes so much sense.
Furthermore, you do not have the time or the cognitive bandwidth to work on a side project, exercise, or learn a high-value skill that could actually increase your income. The cheap rent ends up costing you a massive amount of invisible money, damages your health, and entirely kneecaps your future potential.
You are saving pennies up front to hemorrhage dollars out the back door. It really makes you wonder, looking at your own life. So, for you listening, how do you accurately calculate the true long-term cost of a cheap purchase versus a valuable one in your own life?
That is the question.
It is worth pausing and asking yourself right now, what is a recent choice you made where the low upfront price might actually be creating friction, exhaustion, or hidden maintenance costs for you today?
It is a vital audit. The difference between poor thinking and wealthy thinking is the time horizon.
How so?
Poor thinking asks, what costs less today? Wealthy thinking asks, what delivers the best return over the next 5 years? Sometimes the highly valuable choice costs significantly more upfront, but it reduces daily friction, protects your physical energy, and saves you exponential amounts of money and stress in the long run.
Which brings us to the third internal snare. And this is one that I think requires an immense amount of vulnerability to admit.
The feeling trap.
Yes, the feeling trap. We are talking about emotional spending.
This is deeply rooted in our neurobiology. It is not a character flaw. It's a chemical reaction to our modern environment.
It really is. The foundational idea here is that people very frequently do not buy things because they actually require the physical utility of the item.
Right.
They do not buy a new sweater because they are cold. They buy things as a mechanism to change a negative internal state. You are highly stressed from a conflict at work, you're feeling lonely on a Friday night, or you are just deeply bored on a Sunday afternoon.
So you seek an escape.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You feel a negative emotion, so you open an app, you browse, and you buy something.
You are purchasing dopamine. You are using a financial transaction to artificially stimulate the reward center of your brain. The act of buying something gives you a brief, intense feeling of anticipation and control.
It is like an emotional medicine. Let's think about it this way. Using an online shopping spree to fix the anxiety of a terrible week at work is exactly like taking a powerful painkiller because you have a broken arm.
That's a visceral image.
Right. You take the pill, and for 20 minutes, the throbbing stops. You feel a warm rush of relief. You think, okay, things aren't so bad, but the bone is still fundamentally broken.
The root cause is untouched.
Exactly. The structural damage hasn't been addressed at all. And now you have one less pill in the bottle.
That is a highly accurate representation of the physiological loop. Because what the sources highlight is how this behavior inevitably spirals. You spend the money, you get the dopamine hit, and you feel the temporary relief.
But then tomorrow comes.
But tomorrow morning, the core stressor remains entirely intact. Your difficult manager is still difficult. Your underlying career anxiety is still there. Your loneliness hasn't vanished. But now your bank account is lower?
Which instantly creates a brand new source of anxiety.
Precisely. Now, acute financial pressure is layered on top of the original emotional stress. And here is where the trap snaps shut. Because your brain has learned that the coping mechanism for stress is spending money, this new financial pressure triggers the urgent desire to spend again just to numb the pain of feeling broke.
Wow.
It is a perfectly self-feeding cycle of destruction.
And the text makes a great point that this rarely looked like buying a Rolex. It is insidious because it is small.
Yes, the trap thrives on justifiable microtransactions. It does not look like one massive mistake. It looks like 100 tiny rationalized purchases.
I had a hard morning.
Exactly. A $7 artisan coffee because I had a hard morning. A $30 food delivery because I'm too tired to cook. A $50 gadget ordered from bed at midnight because I deserve a little treat.
So what is the structural fix? How do you break a neurochemical loop?
The mandate from the sources is crystal clear. You must decouple comfort from commerce. You have to separate your emotional regulation from your financial accounts.
That is easier said than done.
It is. But if stress is the problem, you have to solve stress at the root level. Go for a run, sleep 8 hours, have the difficult, necessary conversation with your boss or your partner. Do not use your hard-earned capital as a temporary emotional anesthetic.
That's powerful. Decouple comfort from commerce. Let's move to the fourth psychological case, which is arguably the most visible one in our culture today. The image trap.
Ah, yes.
This involves taking on status debt and attempting to fake success.
This trap has always existed, but it has been weaponized and exponentially amplified by the visual nature of social media. It is the pursuit of the illusion of progress over actual progress.
The core of this is using debt to look rich and attempting to project the aesthetic of success before you have actually built any underlying value. You see it everywhere.
Everywhere.
It is the 24-year-old making $50,000 a year who leases a BMW 3 Series. It is putting luxury vacations on a credit card to ensure the Instagram grid looks immaculate.
It is entirely performative.
I look at this like building a car. Spending your capital on visible signals of success, the designer clothes, the luxury vehicles, the VIP table service, instead of investing in actual compounding assets or skills.
Right.
It's like taking every dollar you have and spending it on a stunning, custom, metallic paint job for a car that has absolutely no engine under the hood.
That's perfectly stated.
You roll this beautiful shell out into the driveway, and everyone in the neighborhood walks by and thinks, wow, that person is incredibly successful. Look at that shine. It looks fast. It looks dominant.
But the second you actually need to drive somewhere, the second the economy shifts and you need to perform or generate real value or survive a downturn, the vehicle cannot move a single inch. It has no internal power.
It is a hollow shell. And this begs the psychological question. Why do smart, capable people willingly do this? What drives someone to hollow out their own future just to look good in the present?
The sources delve deep into the evolutionary and social drivers behind this. As social primates, humans are deeply hardwired to seek status within our tribe.
Because status equals survival.
Exactly. Status historically meant safety and access to resources. Image creates incredibly fast, highly tangible social rewards. When you wear the right watch or drive the right car, people treat you differently immediately. You get better service. You get immediate validation.
The dopamine hits right away.
Exactly. But real values deep technical skills, sound judgment, emotional intelligence, a reliable professional network, a diverse investment portfolio. Those things are agonizingly slow to build. And worse, they are entirely invisible for a very long time.
Nobody sees them.
Nobody claps for you when you max out your Roth IRA or read a dense book on market history on a Friday night.
Only losers win at status games.
Yeah.
That quote from the Elix piece really landed for me.
It is a profound Stoic realization. The fundamental math of the image trap is this. Borrowing money to fund an image pulls your future income into the present and sets it on fire.
Wow. Sets it on fire.
You are literally sending the bill to your future self just to purchase the temporary attention of strangers today. The trap is that maintaining this fake image consumes the exact resources, the time, the capital, the mental bandwidth that you desperately need to build the real engine. The $800 a month you spend on the luxury car lease is the exact capital that could have bought you specialized coding training or provided the financial runway to launch your own business. The energy you spend curating the performance of success is energy stolen directly from the pursuit of actual achievement.
It sounds utterly exhausting. You become a hostage to your own facade. Well, let's pivot slightly, because we have thoroughly mapped the internal psychology here.
Right, the internal traps.
We understand lifestyle inflation, the false economy of cheap goods, the emotional spending loop, and the hollow nature of status debt. But here's the reality check. These internal psychological flaws do not exist in a vacuum.
No, they don't.
We do not just spontaneously invent these behaviors in isolation. We act this way because the environment we live in, the culture, our peer groups, the modern economy, actively normalizes and encourages these traps.
Very true.
This shifts us from internal psychology to external sociology. Let's examine the current practices of modern society.
This is where we analyze the water the fish is swimming in. Our environment dictates our baseline of what feels normal.
The first societal practice we need to look at is what I think of as the pride of the Polish. The core observation from our sources is that in the modern era, people demand the final, highly polished version of success immediately.
Immediate perfection.
Yes, there is a complete widespread refusal to start small or look messy.
And the literature identifies the root cause of this paralysis with one word: pride.
Pride.
We are paralyzed by the fear of looking like beginners. We live in an extensively curated culture. Every day, you are bombarded with the highlight reels of others. You see the massive IPO, the flawless product launch, the perfectly decorated mansion.
Right.
Because we only see the polished endpoints, we develop a deep psychological aversion to the messy, embarrassing first steps required to actually build anything.
We want to be the visionary CEO on day one. We do not want to be the person sweating in a garage surrounded by half-broken prototypes.
Exactly. People refuse to start a small side income that only generates $50 a week because it sounds entirely unimpressive when they talk about it at dinner parties.
Oh, I made $50. It just doesn't sound cool.
Right. They refuse to adopt basic, boring financial routines because printing out a budget doesn't feel like a glamorous, massive breakthrough. They want elegance immediately.
And the tragic speculation from the experts here is that by rejecting the humble beginning, people effectively delay their own progress by decades.
Yes.
They sit on the sidelines waiting for the perfect moment or the grand, dignified opportunity that is, frankly, never going to arrive. But wealth and competence do not begin with elegance. They begin with friction, awkwardness, restraint, and relentless repetition.
Small is fine, still is not. That's the mantra. If your pride prevents you from making small, unglamorous, clumsy moves early on, you will never generate the initial friction required to build momentum. You have to be willing to look foolish to become wealthy.
That is a fantastic rule. Be willing to look foolish. Moving to the second practice, and this one is an absolute juggernaut, the social echo chamber.
This is a big one.
This is about how our environment normalizes financial destruction. We are mimetic creatures. We subconsciously copy the behaviors of the people around us.
This trap is exceptionally dangerous because it operates almost entirely below the threshold of our conscious awareness. Your brain establishes its baseline of acceptable behavior by observing your immediate social circle.
Think about the mundane, everyday practices. If your core group of friends goes out for expensive $100 dinners every single weekend, your brain stops viewing that as an extravagant luxury and begins viewing it as a mandatory social baseline.
Right.
If your coworkers constantly complain about being broke, a scarcity mindset and complaining become your default mental states. If every family member you know carries rolling credit card debt and views it as inevitable, you will treat consumer debt as just a normal, unavoidable condition of being an adult.
The sources even highlight the subtle power of humor in this dynamic.
Oh, the jokes.
Yes. The casual jokes people make about financial irresponsibility, laughing about maxing out a card on a shopping spree, or joking about how payday means it's time to make terrible decisions. These seem entirely harmless in the moment.
But they're not.
No, psychologically, they are a form of quiet, continuous programming. They validate and excuse lack of discipline.
Oh, I just got paid. Time to go bankrupt at the mall. We've all heard it, and we've probably all said it at some point.
Right, and the strategic analysis emphasizes a crucial point here. You do not need someone to give you explicitly bad advice to fail financially.
You don't.
No, you don't need a friend pulling you aside and saying, hey, you should go make a terrible high-risk investment. That rarely happens. You just need to absorb the shared lifestyle expectations of a group that normalizes chaos.
Wow.
If you spend your time immersed in an environment that actively rewards appearances, prioritizes short-term pleasure, and mocks discipline, you will eventually, inevitably, build the exact financial life your environment trains you to tolerate.
You don't rise to the level of your goals. You sink to the level of your peer group. It raises a fascinating and somewhat uncomfortable point of reflection for you listening. How do you actually audit your own social circle's financial habits?
That's a tough one.
And more critically, if you realize your environment is toxic to your goals, how do you set boundaries without creating massive social conflict? How do you say no to the expensive weekend trip without making your friends feel judged or alienated?
It is one of the most difficult interpersonal tightropes to walk. It requires immense tact, but it is an absolute necessity if you intend to protect your financial trajectory. Sometimes, elevating your life requires changing your room.
Let's shift from the social environment to the physical environment. Practice 3 is what the sources term the geographic tax.
This is highly relevant to the modern post-pandemic economy.
It really is. It's the practice of staying in the wrong city for the wrong reasons.
This represents a massive historical shift in how wealth is accumulated compared to the economic realities of, say, 20 or 30 years ago.
The situation is this. Millions of highly educated, ambitious people are living in some of the most incredibly expensive cities on the planet. Places like New York, Los Angeles, London, San Francisco.
Right.
They moved there specifically to access top-tier careers, elite networking, and major industries. In doing so, they accept astronomical rents, exorbitant daily living costs, and tripling local taxes.
And we have to acknowledge that historically, for the entirety of the 20th century, that was the required non-negotiable map for success. Agglomeration economics were real.
Right.
If you wanted to reach the peak of finance, you physically had to be in Manhattan. If you wanted to build software, you had to be in Silicon Valley. Opportunity had a strict physical address.
But the critical insight from our strategy sources is that this is an old map being used to navigate a totally new world.
Precisely. We have experienced a profound decoupling of geography and income generation. Yes, certain highly specialized physical industries still require geographic concentration. But for a massive swath of modern knowledge workers, creatives, and entrepreneurs, location is no longer the primary driver of value. Yet, through sheer inertia and cultural programming, people still organize their entire financial lives as if it is 1995.
Yeah.
They remain in megacities that consume 100% of their cash flow. They fundamentally confuse prestige with practicality.
It is the prestige factor. It feels important. It sounds incredibly cool at a party to say, I live in Manhattan, or I'm based in LA.
It carries massive social cachet. But we must return to the concept of the gap. If your basic non-negotiable survival costs, your rent, your transport, your baseline food costs, absorb absolutely all of your financial margin, the location is no longer an engine supporting your ambition.
What is it then?
It is a parasite actively taxing it. You are paying a massive premium purely for the privilege of standing within the city limits. The mathematical reality is that wealth grows fastest when your income is reasonably strong, but your environmental pressure is extremely low.
Makes total sense.
If you are making a fantastic top 10% salary, but your zip code leaves you with zero investable savings at the end of the month, you are caught in the geographic tax trap. You are sacrificing true wealth for a prestigious backdrop.
That is a bitter pill for a lot of people to swallow, especially if they've tied their identity to their city. But it might not be as harsh as the final societal practice we need to discuss. Practice 4. The effort illusion.
This is a hard truth.
The failure to learn a high-value skill. This section of the text lays out a reality that is deeply uncomfortable. You can work incredibly hard for decades. You can be the first one in the building, the last one to leave. You can be loyal, sincere, and highly dependable.
And you might never get a single step closer to wealth.
I really have to challenge this, or at least voice the frustration of everyone listening who busts their back every single day. Are the sources genuinely suggesting that loyalty, ethics, and raw hard work do not translate into financial success? Does effort simply not matter anymore?
It is crucial to separate the moral value of work from the economic value of work. Effort absolutely matters for your character, your internal discipline, and your reputation.
Okay.
But when we are analyzing this purely through the lens of financial reward and wealth accumulation, we have to look coldly at market mechanics. The market is not a moral entity.
No, it isn't.
It does not pay based on how physically exhausted you are at the end of your shift. It does not calculate your salary based on how sincere your intentions are or how much you care about the company.
That is brutal.
It is entirely detached from emotion. The market strictly rewards high-value outcomes and the concept of leverage. The sources break this down with intense clarity. What does the global market actually place a premium on?
What does it want?
It pays a premium for individuals who directly bring in new revenue. It pays for those who can architect systems to reduce massive operational costs. It rewards people who can solve highly complex, expensive problems or who possess the judgment to manage significant risk. If your immense hard work is focused entirely on executing repetitive, low-leverage tasks that sit very far away from those core outcomes, your pay ceiling is going to remain permanently low, regardless of your sweat equity.
So you can be the absolute, undisputed best in the world at a low-value task. You can do it faster and with more dedication than anyone else alive. But because the task itself doesn't move the needle for the business, it won't matter for your bank account.
Exactly.
Is the difference between digging a massive ditch with a teaspoon and digging it with a backhoe. You're working much harder with the spoon, but the market only cares about the dirt being moved.
That is a brilliant analogy. If you continuously upskill in a lane that inherently has a low ceiling, your efforts simply cannot translate into market value. You just become a marginally more efficient version of a commodity the market does not heavily value.
So how do you fix it?
To escape the effort illusion, you have to execute a strategic pivot. You must transition from simply being useful to being highly valuable in a way that directly impacts the bottom line or the structural integrity of the enterprise.
It demands a complete shift in perspective. You have to stop asking, how hard am I working? And start asking, how close is my work to the money or to the survival of the business?
That's the exact question.
Which is a vital reflection for anyone listening right now. So ask yourself, if you analyze your current role and your specific industry, what are the skills that directly tie to revenue generation or risk reduction? Not just what your HR job description says, but what actually keeps the CEO awake at night.
Yes.
If you don't know the answer to that, discovering it is your absolute first priority tomorrow morning.
Because answering that question is the exact pivot point where you transition from merely working hard, which keeps you trapped, to working strategically, which builds wealth.
Okay, let's pull all of this together. We have stared down the internal psychological traps, the treadmill of lifestyle inflation, the dopamine hit of emotional spending.
We've covered a lot.
We really have. We have dissected the external environmental traps, the echo chambers, the geographic taxes, and the illusion that raw effort alone equals wealth. The obvious, pressing question now is, what is the blueprint for escape?
Where do we go from here?
Right. How do we build an architecture for our lives that inherently resists these traps? This leads us perfectly into our final section, future implications.
And the irony here is that the very first step in building a secure financial future is abandoning one of the most culturally celebrated strategies for personal change.
Yes, the trap of motivation. This is our final trap, and I was so glad the sources highlighted this because it feels completely counterintuitive to everything the self-help industry preaches.
We have been endlessly conditioned to believe that motivation is the magical fuel of success. We think we need to get motivated to save money or feel inspired to invest.
Right. But the underlying reality is that relying on motivation is an architectural flaw. The Alex Breakdown had a wonderfully self-aware critique of this exact phenomenon.
Oh, I loved that part.
They point out the trap of the midnight burst of inspiration. You know the feeling. You are lying in bed at 1 a.m., you're watching a highly produced motivational video, or maybe even listening to a deep dive analysis like this one.
We've all done it.
Your brain floods with a temporary, cheap dopamine boost. You visualize yourself completely overhauling your life. You feel a massive surge of energy and resolve. You think tomorrow, everything changes.
But then tomorrow happens.
Exactly. 30 minutes later, you fall asleep. The alarm goes off at 6:30 a.m. It's raining, you're tired, and absolutely nothing changes.
Because you relied on an emotion, and motivation is fundamentally the most unreliable emotion we possess. It is weather. It fluctuates based on your blood sugar, your sleep quality, and the weather outside.
That is so true.
Motivation peaks when life is calm, when you are well-rested, and when the sun is shining. But it entirely evaporates the precise moment life gets heavy, stressful, or complicated. If you architect your financial future on the fragile assumption that you will always feel motivated to make the difficult, disciplined choice, your entire plan will collapse under the first sign of real pressure.
So if motivation is a flimsy illusion, what is the actual concrete we should be building with?
The future of wealth building, the true escape from financial stagnation, is based entirely on systems. It is about building the hidden architecture of resilience. You must choose systems over emotion.
Let's ground this in reality. What does a financial system actually look like in the day-to-day life of an average person? How do we build this architecture?
A system is essentially a predetermined rule or an automated structure that completely removes the need for daily willpower. It is the concept of choice architecture.
Choice architecture.
Yes, you want to make the correct behaviors frictionless and automatic, and the destructive behaviors highly difficult. Practically, this looks like setting up automatic transfers from your checking to your investment accounts the exact morning your paycheck clears before you ever see the money.
Oh, out of sight, out of mind.
Exactly. It looks like setting your retirement contributions to automatically increase by 1% every year.
You are literally taking the decision-making power out of your own hands.
Precisely. You are also building friction into your spending. A system is implementing a mandatory, non-negotiable 48-hour waiting period before you are allowed to purchase any non-essential item over $100.
I love that rule.
By forcing a delay, you allow the emotional dopamine spike to fade and the rational prefrontal cortex to re-engage. The entire goal is to put your financial survival on autopilot and drastically reduce the the number of times you have to exercise your willpower.
Because willpower runs out.
Willpower is a finite resource. It depletes rapidly throughout the day. If you force yourself to actively choose to save money every single Friday evening when you are exhausted, eventually, on a particularly bad Friday, your willpower will break and you will spend it.
Right.
But if the automated system moved that money to savings on Wednesday, the temptation doesn't even exist.
I love that. If you build a system that actively protects you from your own worst impulses on your absolute worst days, you no longer need heroic movie montage levels of discipline to succeed. You don't need to be David Goggins with your budget.
Exactly.
You just need to follow the plumbing that you intelligently set up when you were in a calm, rational state of mind.
That is the absolute essence of financial resilience. Systems do not care if you are tired. Systems do not care if you had a bad day. They simply execute.
Which brings us to synthesizing the overarching takeaway from all of our material today. It requires a fundamental redefinition of what wealth actually is.
It really does.
Because, let's be honest, escaping these psychological traps, ignoring the status games, setting up automated index fund investments, driving the reliable 10-year-old Toyota while your peers lease Mercedes from the outside, it makes wealth building look incredibly, painfully boring.
It is exceptionally boring. It lacks all the cinematic glamour of looking rich.
It looks like intentionally turning down lifestyle upgrades that your bank account says you could technically afford. It looks like sitting with the uncomfortable, raw emotion of a terrible day instead of immediately self-medicating with an online shopping cart full of relief.
Yeah.
It looks like relentlessly choosing boring function over shiny symbols.
And the reason it looks that way is because the true functional goal of wealth is fundamentally disconnected from what consumer society tells us it is.
How so?
The actual goal of accumulating capital is not to buy increasingly premium objects to impress people whose opinions you shouldn't even value. The ultimate goal of wealth is the acquisition of unspent options.
Unspent options.
Yes, it is to buy your own time, to buy geographic and professional flexibility, to buy absolute safety for your family.
The opposite of being broke isn't looking rich. It is becoming hard to break. I absolutely love that phrasing from the text, hard to break.
It is the shift from fragility to anti-fragility. When you have cultivated a wide margin between your income and your expenses, when you operate on automated systems, when you are unburdened by the crushing weight of status debt, you can absorb the shocks of life.
Right.
A sudden job loss, an unexpected medical emergency, a severe macroeconomic downturn. These events are stressful, but they do not destroy you. You do not lose your home. You do not panic. Because you built an architecture of resilience, you are no longer fragile.
Wow. We have covered a truly massive amount of ground in this analysis. Let's do a quick structural review of the journey we just took.
Sounds good.
We started by defining these invisible wealth traps, the highly ordinary, normalized habits that quietly bleed our progress dry. We explored the deep psychological snares, the endless treadmill of lifestyle inflation, the dangerous false economy of confusing cheap upfront prices with long-form value.
The neurochemical loop of using spending as emotional medicine.
Yes, and the hollow, capital-destroying engine of status debt.
From there, we looked outward at the environmental practices that normalize this destruction. We examined how our pride and fear of looking foolish stop us from starting small.
We analyzed how our social echo chambers program us to accept financial chaos as normal.
We discussed the crushing reality of the geographic tax and confronted the harsh truth that market value and strategic leverage, not just raw, exhausting effort, dictate your income ceiling.
And finally, we looked to the future. We dismantled the illusion that midnight motivation will save us, realizing instead that true financial resilience is built entirely on cold, automated systems, not fleeting emotions.
As we conclude this deep dive, the most valuable thing you can do is subject your own life to the uncomfortable questions our sources raised.
Absolutely.
Are you deploying capital for true compounding value, or are you just buying cheap temporary fixes? Are you investing your finite time and energy into building incredibly rare skills, or are you squandering it on maintaining the exhausting appearance of success? The honest answers to those questions might sting initially, but that sting is the precise moment you step out of the trap.
They really are. And I want to leave you with one final, slightly provocative thought to mull over as you navigate the rest of your week.
Lay it on us.
We touched on the environmental pressures,
Yeah.
but think about the grand macro scheme of things. The entire modern consumer economy, The relentless advertising, the hyper-optimized algorithms, the social media platforms designed to trigger your insecurities. It relies almost entirely on the assumption that you will fall into these exact traps.
It's fueled by it.
Right. The machinery of the system needs you to purchase instant emotional relief. It needs you to seek status through high-interest debt. It absolutely requires you to inflate your lifestyle the very second you get a raise.
Therefore, if you can successfully build these boring systems, if you consistently choose hidden resilience over visible appearance, is building real, quiet wealth actually a radical act of rebellion against the entire system? It's certainly something to think about. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We will catch you on the next one. Goodbye.